Leora walked through the grand halls of her family's palace, her footsteps echoing softly against the polished floors. She had seen this place 1,000 times, yet today it felt suffocating. The walls, adorned with shimmering tapestries of her ancestors' victories, reminded her constantly of the life she had never chosen. Every painting, every statue, seemed to whisper expectations she could not escape. And now those expectations had brought her to this moment. A moment she dreaded, yet could not avoid. The human had arrived yesterday. Marcus, a representative from the distant world called Earth, sent by a race that many on Leora's planet considered primitive. Humans were said to be fragile, unpredictable, and incapable of matching the precision and discipline of her own species. And yet, her family had arranged this marriage. It was not about love or even compatibility. It was about duty, about alliances, about securing their place in the galaxy. Leora stopped at a tall window overlooking the city. Outside, the streets shimmered with neon lights and hovercraft glided silently across the sky. From up here, the city seemed calm, almost beautiful, but she knew the undercurrents of politics and power that ran through it. Her family would measure every decision, every action, every glance, and judge it for its potential benefit, and she had no choice but to obey. The sound of soft footsteps behind her made her turn. Marcus stood there, hands clasped in front of him, eyes calm but alert. His presence was unassuming, almost human in its simplicity, and yet it carried a quiet confidence that seemed out of place in the grand artificial formality of her palace. "Good morning, Lady Leora," he said politely. His voice was even, respectful, without the airs of someone trying to impress. "Good morning," she replied coolly. She avoided looking directly at him, afraid of revealing more than she intended.
"I assume you are adjusting to our customs?"
"I am learning," he said with a faint smile.
"Every place has its rules.
Every people have their ways. I will follow them." She studied him. There was no arrogance, no false charm, nothing designed to dazzle her or her family. And yet there was something in the way he carried himself that made her uneasy. Perhaps it was the way he observed everything, quietly taking in details, calculating, understanding without judgment. Or perhaps it was simply the unfamiliarity of a human who did not stumble under the weight of her world's expectations. Her father entered the room without knocking, his presence commanding attention as always. "Leora," he said, voice sharp with authority. "You will meet with the council today. They wish to see that this arrangement is proceeding smoothly, and Marcus, you will accompany her. Show respect, behave with decorum." Marcus inclined his head. "Of course." Leora did not respond. She turned away from the window and followed him down the corridor. The halls were filled with servants and attendants who whispered as they passed, their eyes full of curiosity, judgment, and, in some cases, pity. They all wondered the same thing. How could a human, so physically unremarkable, be worthy of a noble alien bride? As they reached the council chamber, Leora's stomach tightened. The room was vast, filled with high-ranking officials and advisors, each dressed in ornate robes that signified their power. Their eyes turned to her, assessing her every move, every gesture, as if she were a specimen to be studied. At their side, Marcus seemed almost invisible, yet somehow he commanded attention without trying. The council members began their formal questioning, asking about Marcus's background, his achievements, his skills. Leora listened quietly, her expression neutral, as Marcus answered each question with precision. He admitted what he did not know, but emphasized what he had learned, what he could do, and how he could adapt. "Your world is young," one counselor said, voice dripping with condescension. "Can your people truly compete with ours in matters of strategy and governance?" Marcus's eyes did not flinch. "Perhaps not in every way," he said. But humans have a strength you may underestimate. We adapt, we endure, we learn quickly. And when we fail, we find another way. A murmur spread across the room. Leora noticed it, but kept her expression unchanged. She was not yet ready to show that she, too, was surprised by his words. The council continued, but Marcus answered each question with calm intelligence. He spoke of his experiences on Earth, of times when humans faced overwhelming odds and survived, of moments when they turned weakness into strength. And though he did not boast, his words carried a weight that even the most skeptical officials could not ignore. After the meeting, Leora and Marcus walked through the palace gardens. The air was crisp, scented with strange alien flowers that glowed faintly under the city lights. She kept her distance, unsure of what to make of him.
"You handled that well," she said finally, her voice softer than she intended. "I expected
less." He looked at her, expression neutral, but eyes kind. "And I expected skepticism. I am used to it, but I do not mind. I will do my best to meet expectations, not to impress, but to succeed." Leora frowned. She had never met someone so calm under scrutiny. On her world, most would crumble under such pressure, or lash out in anger or arrogance. Marcus simply remained steady, like a rock in a storm. "Why do you stay so composed?" she asked, curiosity breaking through her usual reserve. "Because I must," he said simply, "and because it serves no purpose to be anything else. Every action has a consequence. Every choice matters. I focus on what I can do, not what others expect me to feel." She walked ahead in silence, her thoughts swirling. Could it be true that humans were capable of more than her world gave them credit for? She had always been taught that alien intellect and discipline were superior, that humans were charming but ultimately weak. And yet, Marcus was not weak. Not in mind, not in spirit, not even in the quiet ways he commanded respect without demanding it. Days passed, and Leora observed him closely. He learned her language quickly, adapted to alien customs, and even participated in ceremonial events with grace that surprised everyone. Yet he never sought attention, never tried to dominate or impress. He simply did what needed to be done. In private, she began to notice subtler things. The way he treated servants with genuine respect, the way he listened before speaking, the patience he showed in understanding their complex social hierarchies. Small things, perhaps, but they carried weight. He moved through her world like a shadow, unnoticed by some, undeniable to others. And slowly, she began to wonder if humans were not the fragile creatures she had been told to disdain, but something entirely different. One evening, as the two of them walked along the balcony overlooking the city, a strange feeling stirred in Leora's chest. She could not name it. Was it respect? Admiration? Curiosity? Perhaps all of it. She watched him study the city lights, calm and unflinching, and realized that he saw the world in ways she had never considered. Where she saw rules and hierarchy, he saw possibilities. Where she saw limits, he saw opportunity. "You do not fear this place," she said quietly, almost to herself. "I do not fear what I do not understand," he replied, "and I am learning. I trust that the more I learn, the better I can act." She turned to him, searching his face. There was no arrogance, no condescension, no desire to belittle her world, only determination, quiet and steady, like a river cutting through stone. Leora sighed, leaning against the railing. She had married him out of obligation, as expected by her family, by tradition, by society. She had thought it would be dull, a mere formality, and yet she found herself intrigued, even unsettled, by this human who seemed ordinary in appearance, but extraordinary in essence. The palace was silent around them, the city lights glowing faintly in the distance. Leora realized that for the first time she did not feel entirely in control. Marcus had arrived as a human envoy, bound by duty, and yet he had begun to change the way she saw everything, her family, her world, herself. And deep down, a tiny spark of something unfamiliar began to grow. She did not know what it meant yet, and she did not want to admit it. But the human beside her was no longer just a husband by obligation. He was a presence she could not ignore. The first part of her story with Marcus had begun, not with passion, not with love, but with duty. And yet, even in those first quiet days, the seed of something far greater had been planted. The city was restless when the first reports arrived. Alien scouts returning from the outer colonies brought news of fleets gathering beyond the system, strange alliances forming among factions that had long been rivals. Leora's palace buzzed with activity. Her father and the council met in urgency, their voices sharp with fear and calculation. Yet beneath the bravado, even they could not hide the tremor of doubt. "Prepare the defenses," her father commanded. "Every fleet, every soldier, every drone. We cannot fail." "Not now!" Leora listened from the doorway, her heart quickening. She had always thought her life would be shaped by ceremonial duties, polite conversations, and careful alliances. War had seemed distant, something that happened in histories, not in her sparkling city above the planet's surface. And now, it had arrived. Marcus stood beside her quietly. Unlike the alien generals who barked orders and argued endlessly over tactics, he observed calmly, asking questions when necessary, listening more than he spoke. Leora had noticed this steadiness before, but now, in the shadow of approaching war, it seemed almost otherworldly. Where others panicked, he was calm. Where others rushed to show their authority, he prepared silently, studying every report, every map, every movement of enemy ships. "This is different from your council meetings," Leora said quietly, startling him. "Here, hesitation can mean death. And they may not survive your calm."
"I do not seek to impress them," Marcus replied, eyes scanning a holographic display of the outer colonies. "I seek to act in the way that works."
Panic does not win wars. Preparation does. The first strike came at dawn. Alien ships of a rival faction swept into the outer colonies, moving with terrifying speed and precision. Alarms rang across the city, and the sky above filled with streaks of laser fire and the distant roar of energy weapons. Civilians ran to shelters, while the military mobilized, their once orderly ranks now charged with the raw terror of real combat. Leora watched from the palace balcony, her stomach tightening. She had seen battles in history, holovids, but nothing compared to this. The air smelled faintly of ozone and burning metal. The ground trembled beneath her feet as explosions erupted across the city's outskirts. And amidst it all, Marcus moved with purpose. He did not fight blindly. He did not shout commands. Instead, he assessed the battlefield as a whole. Alien fleets were strong and technologically advanced, but they were predictable. They followed tactics passed down for centuries, relying on strategy manuals and hierarchy rather than instinct or creativity. Marcus noticed patterns, weaknesses invisible to even the most experienced alien commanders. "Form smaller squads," he said to the generals, pointing at the tactical display. "Split the enemy's attention. They will underestimate smaller groups. Hit their supply lines first, and use the terrain to your advantage. You have drones that can cloak. Send them in where their sensors fail. Their confidence is their weakness." The generals exchanged nervous glances. Many had never taken advice from a human before. Some doubted, others mocked silently, but desperation overrode pride. Orders were sent, and when the first squads moved under Marcus's direction, the results were immediate. Supply ships were captured or destroyed, enemy formations were disrupted, and the alien fleets began to falter in ways no one had anticipated. Leora could hardly believe her eyes. The human she had married out of obligation was commanding alien forces with a skill and confidence that surpassed even the most decorated generals. Soldiers whispered his name as they passed, though Marcus never sought recognition. He was in the thick of it, moving from unit to unit, offering advice, calming fears, and making decisions faster than anyone thought possible. One mission stood out. A strike force of humans and allied aliens was sent to reclaim a colony under siege. The enemy had set up energy shields and automated defenses that even the best alien engineers could not bypass. Marcus volunteered to lead the team personally. Leora watched from a holographic projection in the palace war room as he landed on the planet's surface, alone at first, scanning, assessing, planning. He coordinated his team with calm authority. Using unconventional methods the aliens had never considered, he manipulated the enemy's energy fields, found weak points in their shields, and even devised a diversion using captured drones. One by one, the defenses fell, the colony was saved, and his squad emerged unscathed. Alien soldiers were in awe, whispering that the human fought like a god among men, unstoppable, fearless, brilliant. Back in the city, Leora's perception of him began to change. She had married him out of duty, assuming he would be weak, ordinary, and perhaps charming enough to bear the title of husband. Yet now, seeing him in action, watching him rise to challenges that would crush even the most disciplined alien minds, she felt something unfamiliar, respect, awe, and perhaps something deeper, though she did not yet name it. But war was unforgiving. Even with Marcus's brilliance, there were casualties. Cities were scarred, colonies damaged, and families torn apart. Leora saw the cost, the fear in soldiers' eyes, the grief of parents losing children, and through it all, Marcus never wavered. He comforted, directed, and inspired simultaneously. He did not act as a commander demanding obedience. He acted as a human who understood fear, pain, and hope, and knew how to turn them into strength. One night, after a long day of reports and battle coordination, Leora found herself alone with Marcus on a quiet terrace overlooking the shattered outskirts of the city. Fires still burned in the distance, and the smoke carried the acrid scent of war. She turned to him, searching his calm expression. "You seem unshaken," she said softly. "I can barely stand the sight of destruction. And yet, you move through it as if it were ordinary." He looked at her, and she noticed the faintest glint of exhaustion behind his steady gaze, though he did not let it show. "Ordinary or not, someone must act," he said. "If I allow fear to control me, others will suffer." "I cannot, must not allow that." She shook her head, torn between frustration and admiration. "It is not just action that amazes me," she admitted. "It is the way you see things. You notice patterns where others see chaos. You do what no one else thinks possible. How can a human do that?" He smiled faintly, a small, almost imperceptible gesture. "Perhaps it is because humans must. We are not the strongest, not the fastest, not the most numerous. But we survive. We learn. We endure. We find a way when no one expects us to. That is what allows us to act." Leora did not respond immediately. The words settled in her mind, echoing like a rhythm she had never known. For the first time, she questioned everything she had been taught, about humans, about weakness, about what it meant to be extraordinary. The war escalated. Each day brought new threats, more complex strategies from enemy factions, and challenges that pushed every soldier and leader to their limits. Marcus continued to shine, not because he sought glory, but because he acted with intelligence, courage, and unshakable resolve. He became a symbol, quietly inspiring not just humans but aliens as well, who began to see that strength was not only measured in technology or tradition, but in willpower and creativity. One battle in particular became legendary even among the aliens. Enemy forces had surrounded a human colony, cutting off supplies and communications. The situation seemed hopeless. Alien commanders debated retreat, fearing total annihilation. Marcus, however, calmly devised a plan. Using a combination of cloaked drones, improvised energy disruptions, and synchronized strikes, he turned the trap into an advantage. The enemy was forced to scatter, the colony saved, and Marcus's team suffered no casualties. Reports from alien soldiers called it miraculous. Some even whispered he fought like a god of war incarnate. Leora observed all of this, her thoughts a whirlwind. She had married him as a formality, a duty to her family, a binding arrangement of politics and expectation. And yet now, she could not ignore the truth. Marcus, a human, was not fragile. He was extraordinary. He was courageous, intelligent, and relentless in the face of impossible odds. He did not dominate with fear or pride, but with strategy, empathy, and ingenuity, the very qualities her world had long dismissed in humans. That night, as the city slept under a sky dotted with a faint glow of distant ships, Leora found herself standing beside Marcus on the palace balcony. Fires from the outskirts of the city still glowed, and the distant hum of energy weapons reminded her that the war was far from over. "You have changed the way this war is fought," she said quietly, almost in awe, "and perhaps the way I see everything." He turned to her, eyes steady and calm. "I do what must be done, and you see beyond expectation. That is rare." She looked away, unsure how to process the emotions swelling within her. Respect, curiosity. Perhaps even something more. She could not yet name it. But one thing was clear. Marcus, the human she had married out of obligation, was no ordinary man. He was a force in motion, rising in ways her world had never anticipated. And as the night deepened, Leora understood that her life, her perspective, and perhaps even her heart, would never be the same. The war had stretched on for weeks, yet every day seemed to bring new challenges. Alien fleets grew more aggressive, striking deeper into the colonies and testing every defense. Panic and despair rippled through the ranks, and whispers of doubt echoed even among the most loyal generals. But Marcus moved like a calm center in the storm, his mind always alert, calculating, ready to turn chaos into advantage. Reports of his successes spread quickly. Soldiers spoke of the human who could predict enemy movements before they happened, who improvised strategies that confounded even the most experienced alien commanders. He did not boast, did not seek recognition, but the stories grew like wildfire. They called him the god of war, the one who led victories where failure seemed inevitable. Leora heard the rumors with a mixture of disbelief and fascination. Each tale she heard only confirmed what she had already begun to see. Marcus was extraordinary. One morning, news arrived that a major enemy fleet was approaching the planet where one of the outer colonies had been struggling. The fleet was vast, their ships heavily armed, and their strategy aggressive. Alien commanders argued fiercely, debating retreat, defense, or surrender. Leora watched, tension twisting in her chest, as fear and indecision paralyzed the council. Marcus remained calm, his fingers tracing paths across the tactical map. "If we allow them to dictate the terms, they will win," he said softly, yet his voice carried authority. "We do not respond with panic. We respond with strategy. We strike where they least expect it, and we force them into mistakes." A general snorted. "And you think a human can command this fleet? You underestimate the danger." "I do not underestimate it," Marcus replied steadily. "I understand it, and that understanding gives us the advantage they cannot predict." Plans were made according to his guidance. Smaller, faster ships were positioned to harass the enemy flanks, while Marcus coordinated energy pulses to disrupt their communication signals. Alien commanders, initially skeptical, followed his instructions, and as the battle began, it became clear that Marcus's calculations were precise. The fight was brutal. Laser fire streaked across the void, explosions rippled through enemy hulls, and the colony's defenses strained under the pressure. Yet Marcus moved through the chaos with remarkable clarity. He anticipated attacks before they happened, redirected units when necessary, and never lost focus. His calm presence steadied the soldiers around him, and even alien generals began to defer to his judgment without question. In the midst of the battle, Marcus made a bold decision. A group of heavily armed enemy ships was advancing toward the colony's energy core, a critical target. Retreat would have been the safe choice, yet he chose to engage. Using a combination of cloaked drones, decoy energy pulses, and synchronized strikes, he led a small squad directly into the heart of the enemy formation. The maneuver was risky, perhaps suicidal by conventional measures, but Marcus calculated every angle. The squad moved with precision. Shields absorbed enemy fire. Drones distracted key targets, and Marcus directed every step. In moments that felt like hours, the enemy formation faltered, their coordinated attack collapsing. The energy core remained intact, and the colony survived. Reports later described it as impossible, miraculous, legendary. Leora watched from the command tower, her hands gripping the railing as awe and disbelief warred within her. "You," she whispered under her breath, not sure how to continue. How can a human do this? Marcus turned, his expression calm but not proud. "I do what must be done," he said simply. "I cannot control what others think. I can only act in ways that help." That night, the city celebrated cautiously. Soldiers returned with stories of his bravery. Children whispered about the god of war who had saved them, and even alien leaders began to speak of Marcus with a newfound respect. Leora walked among the crowd, feeling both pride and confusion. She had married him out of obligation, yet she could no longer deny the admiration stirring in her heart. She found him later, alone on the balcony overlooking the still-burning outskirts of the colony. He was quiet, reviewing reports, making notes, and planning the next steps. She approached hesitantly, unsure how to speak, how to feel, how to confront the emotions swirling within her. "You are becoming a legend," she said finally. He looked at her, eyes tired but steady. "A legend?" he asked softly. "Yes," she admitted. "Everyone speaks of you. Soldiers, generals, civilians. They say you fight like a god of war. You lead like no one else. You inspire them. Inspire me." Marcus's gaze softened, though he did not let pride take hold. "I do not fight for recognition," he said. "I fight because it is necessary. I lead because someone must. Inspiration is a byproduct, not the goal." She nodded, feeling the weight of his words. They were true, and yet they only made her admiration deepen. Here was a human, seemingly ordinary in appearance, who carried the burdens of war with clarity, courage, and a wisdom that surpassed generations of alien commanders. He was not perfect, but he was remarkable in ways she had never imagined. The next challenge came swiftly. Enemy forces had retreated only to regroup in a massive fleet beyond the system. Intelligence suggested they were preparing a final decisive strike, a coordinated attack designed to crush the human colonies and any resistance. Panic gripped the council again, but Marcus remained composed. He proposed a plan that was audacious. Rather than meet the enemy fleet head-on, he suggested splitting the defense into multiple layers, striking their supply lines, intercepting communication signals, and creating illusions to mislead the enemy. It was unconventional, risky, and would rely on split-second timing and trust among soldiers unaccustomed to human methods. Leora watched as the council debated, arguing against him at first. Yet slowly they began to see the merit in his plan. It required intellect, courage, and a willingness to trust in human ingenuity, a concept foreign to them, yet undeniable in Marcus's calm logic. The battle commenced, and Marcus's strategy unfolded flawlessly. Enemy fleets moved as he predicted, falling into traps and overextending their reach. Supplies were disrupted, communication lines broken, and morale began to falter. Alien commanders marveled at the precision, while soldiers found themselves inspired by the human who moved among them, guiding, directing, protecting. During a critical moment, Marcus personally intervened. A group of elite enemy ships threatened to destroy the defensive fleet. Conventional methods would have demanded a cautious retreat. Instead, Marcus led a daring strike, using speed, surprise, and unconventional tactics to disable the enemy vessels. His squad emerged unscathed, and the enemy was thrown into disarray. Reports called it genius, miraculous, heroic. Some began to whisper that Marcus was no mere human, but a force of nature, a living legend who could not be defeated. Leora could no longer contain her emotions. She had married him out of duty, believing humans were fragile, ordinary, limited. And yet here he was. Brilliant, courageous, unstoppable in ways that transcended the expectations of her people. Her admiration had grown into awe, and awe had begun to stir feelings she had never intended to feel. She approached him again on the balcony after the battle, the city around them quiet but scarred. Fires still burned in the distance and smoke hung faintly in the air. She did not know how to speak, how to articulate the whirlwind inside her. "You are unlike anyone I have ever met," she said quietly. "I thought I knew humans, and I thought I knew war. But you surpass both." Marcus looked at her, his expression calm, but she noticed the faintest shadow of emotion in his eyes. "I am only what I am," he said. "I do not claim to surpass. I only act, and I do what must be done." She shook her head, smiling faintly despite herself. "You inspire more than you know. Not just the soldiers, not just the council. Me too." For a long moment they stood in silence, the hum of distant engines, and the glow of fires painting the city in gold and red. Leora realized that her perspective had shifted completely. The human she had married out of obligation was no longer ordinary. He was extraordinary, brilliant, courageous, and utterly inspiring. She could not ignore the truth any longer. He had become something greater than she had ever imagined, a legend in his own right, a force that could shape the fate of worlds, and deep inside, she knew that her feelings were changing too. She had married him out of duty, but now she felt a connection forged through respect, admiration, and the recognition of greatness. Marcus had risen not because he sought glory, but because he embodied the qualities that defined humanity: courage, adaptability, intelligence, and relentless determination. Leora did not know what the future held, or how the war would end, but she knew one thing clearly: the human beside her had changed everything, and she would never see him or herself the same way again. The galaxy held its breath. After weeks of escalating conflict, enemy fleets had consolidated into a massive armada, intent on crushing the human colonies and breaking the alliance of worlds that had begun to rally under Marcus's guidance. Every planet, every colony, every city under threat watched in anxious silence. Reports of Marcus's earlier victories had spread far and wide, but now he faced a challenge unlike any before, a decisive strike that could change the fate of the galaxy. Leora stood beside him in the command hall, her heart racing. She had followed him through battles, watched him defy odds that seemed impossible, and slowly, unwillingly, her admiration had grown into something deeper. She had married him out of obligation, believing the human to be fragile, ordinary, and incapable of true greatness. Yet here he was, calm, focused, unwavering, a human who had risen like a god of war. Marcus studied the tactical displays before him, a complex web of enemy ships, defensive arrays, and potential ambush points. Every option had risks. Every move had consequences. Yet he did not panic. His mind worked quickly, calculating possibilities, weighing outcomes, and preparing contingencies for failures that had not yet occurred. "We cannot hold them with brute force alone," he said quietly, yet his voice carried authority. "We must outthink them. We must force them to fight on our terms, not theirs, and we must protect the colonies at all costs. Alien commanders, once skeptical, now deferred to his judgment. His earlier successes had earned him a reputation not as a human envoy, but as a leader, a strategist, a force to be reckoned with. Soldiers whispered his name with reverence. Civilians spoke of him in awe. Marcus did not seek recognition, but the galaxy had given it to him nonetheless. The first wave of the enemy attack arrived at dawn. Enemy ships surged through space like a dark tide, their weapons blazing, shields shimmering. Leora watched as the first line of defense engaged them, energy beams cutting through the void. Her stomach tightened as explosions rocked the outer colonies. But Marcus remained steady, issuing commands with clarity and precision. "Divert the second wave through the asteroid field," he instructed, pointing at a holographic projection. "Their sensors cannot detect small ships among the rocks."
"We can ambush them and thin their ranks before they reach the main colony. The maneuver was risky."
Any miscalculation could mean total destruction. Yet alien fleets, trained in rigidity and protocol, followed his instructions. Small strike teams moved through the asteroid field, cloaked drones darting between rocks. When the enemy entered, they were caught off guard. Ships collided, shields failed, and the tide began to shift. Leora felt her pulse quicken. She had seen battles before, victories that Marcus had orchestrated, but nothing compared to this. Here, on the edge of annihilation, he commanded with brilliance, courage, and composure that seemed beyond human limits. The battle raged for hours. Enemy commanders adapted, sending reinforcements and adjusting strategies. Alien leaders panicked when their predictions failed. But Marcus anticipated every move. He coordinated counterattacks, redirected fleets, and even personally led a small strike team to disable a critical energy cannon aimed at the main colony. Leora watched as he moved among the troops, a figure of calm determination. Soldiers followed him instinctively, inspired not by fear, not by rank, but by the quiet certainty in his actions. He fought alongside them, yet his mind never wavered. Every move, every command, every decision was precise, deliberate, and deadly effective. At a critical moment, the enemy fleet concentrated on one of the central colonies, hoping to cripple the alliance. The defensive line was faltering. Marcus assessed the situation quickly, recognizing that a direct confrontation would be too costly. Instead, he devised an audacious plan. "We will split into 3 groups," he said, pointing at the tactical map. 2 will draw their attention, feint attacks to divide their forces. The 3rd will strike the core of their armada, where their command ships are concentrated. If we succeed, their coordination will collapse. Alien commanders exchanged nervous glances. The plan was daring, almost reckless. Yet they trusted him. His earlier victories had proven that his strategies worked where conventional tactics failed. The operation began. Fleets moved according to Marcus's design, engaging the enemy in ways they did not anticipate. Decoys drew fire, small strike teams harassed flanks, and Marcus himself led the critical strike toward the heart of the enemy armada. The fight was brutal. Energy weapons flared across space, explosions rocked ships, and even Marcus's squad faced deadly fire. Yet he remained focused, issuing calm instructions, adapting strategies on the fly, and keeping his team alive. Alien soldiers who had once doubted him now followed his lead with unwavering loyalty. In the heat of the battle, Marcus spotted an enemy flagship attempting to escape. Its destruction would secure victory. Calculating the risks, he piloted a small, fast ship through enemy fire, dodging lasers and missiles with skill that seemed instinctive. His squad followed, supporting him with precision. Together, they disabled the flagship's engines and weapons, forcing its surrender. The galaxy seemed to hold its breath as the flagship fell. Enemy morale shattered. Fleets retreated in disarray, abandoning their attacks on the colonies. The war that had threatened countless lives came to a turning point. because of one human who had risen to meet impossible odds. Back on the command balcony, Leora watched him, her emotions a mixture of awe, relief, and something deeper she could not yet name. The human she had married out of obligation had become a legend, not through arrogance, not through overwhelming power, but through courage, intelligence, and unyielding determination. The celebrations that followed were cautious at first, then gradually spread through the colonies. Soldiers praised Marcus's leadership, civilians honored his bravery, and even alien leaders spoke of him with respect bordering on reverence. He did not seek the glory, but it found him nonetheless. Leora walked through the city after the battle, among the returning soldiers and citizens. She had seen destruction, despair, and loss. Yet now, hope was rising. Everywhere she looked, people spoke of the human who had led them through darkness. She realized, with a mixture of wonder and humility, that humans, fragile in body, ordinary in appearance, could rise to greatness in ways her world had never expected. That evening, she found Marcus alone on the balcony overlooking the planet's skyline. Fires still glowed faintly from the outskirts, and the air carried the scent of smoke and ozone. She approached him cautiously, unsure how to speak, how to express the whirlwind of emotions within her. "You did it," she said softly. "You saved them all. You saved everything." Marcus turned to her, expression calm, though she could see the faint traces of exhaustion in his eyes.
"I did what was necessary," he replied. "I could not allow others to suffer when I could act."
She shook her head, smiling faintly despite herself. "It is more than that. You inspired them. You inspired me. I married you out of obligation, thinking humans were fragile, limited, ordinary. And yet you are anything but." His eyes met hers, steady and unwavering. "I am only what I am," he said softly. "Humans endure. We adapt. We rise when we must. That is all." She felt a warmth in her chest, a spark that had grown quietly over weeks of witnessing his courage, intelligence, and determination. She realized that her admiration had deepened into something more. Respect had turned to awe, awe into connection, and connection into something she could no longer ignore. "You are extraordinary?" she whispered, "not just in battle, not just in strategy, but in everything, in the way you see the world, in the way you care, in the way you inspire. You changed everything." Marcus looked at her, silent for a long moment, and then reached out to gently take her hand. "I only did what humans do when faced with impossible odds," he said. "We endure, we rise, we act, and we care for those who depend on us." She felt the weight of his words, the truth and simplicity in them. She had married him out of obligation, but now she chose to see him as he truly was, a human who had risen like a god of war, shaping not just the outcome of battles, but the hearts and minds of those around him. The city below glowed faintly, peaceful for the first time in weeks. The colonies were safe, the enemies scattered, and the galaxy had witnessed the rise of a human who defied expectations. Leora squeezed his hand gently, feeling the connection between them deepen. She no longer saw him as an obligation, nor as merely a representative of a distant, primitive world. She saw him as a force, a presence, a legend, and in that moment, she knew that her life, her heart, and her perspective had changed forever. The human beside her had risen like a god of war, not to conquer for pride or glory, but to act with courage, intelligence, and unwavering resolve. Leora smiled softly, finally allowing herself to feel the admiration, the awe, and the quiet love that had grown in her heart. She had married him as a duty, but now she stood beside a human who had shown her the true meaning of strength, courage, and greatness. The galaxy was vast, filled with stars, planets, and possibilities, and yet, for Leora, one truth had become clear. Humans, though seemingly ordinary, could rise to greatness beyond imagining. They could inspire, endure, and change the course of history. And she would walk beside this human, not out of obligation, but out of choice, respect, and a profound recognition of his extraordinary spirit. As the night settled over the planet, the stars twinkled above like silent witnesses. The war was not yet over everywhere, but a legend had been born. A human who had risen, unstoppable, fearless, and brilliant. And beside him, the woman who had married out of duty now stood, proud, inspired, and ready to face whatever came next. Together,